Hello, hello, hello. I hope you had a lovely lunch. Everyone outside, please come in. We're about to start. And because Moose and Lisa were talking about Kill Bill, I will do some Kill Bill moves because I'm wearing yellow. I'm holding a samurai sword. This was like splattering. Please come inside. We're about to start. You're imagining the sword, right? Are you getting ready? Are we here? Welcome. Now let's go for a big applause. Let's go! Like you mean it! So, for the ones that weren't here this morning, then I would like to say my name is Sigríður Soffía, and I'm a dancer, fireworks showmaker, and your ringmaster of the day. So, we talked about so many things this morning, and I wanted to say a few things that stood out for me. We talked about designing hospitals and structural violence, architecture serving society, donut economics, really nice word, to rewild, to bring something back. We talked about birds, interesting talks about fashion, valuable materials, sustainability of course, a better future. I always love the hope. When I listen to designers, it really sparks hope that we can do things better. Then we talked about bonus bags. Yeah, so that was all the stuff we talked about before. So, moving on, we are here at Harpan, but we are streaming live on the Dezeen platforms. So without further ado, we will move into the new chapter, and because of some issues, some speakers were bumped before noon and others were moved. So the next act is Feelings and Fantasy. Act 3 starts in 3, 2, 1, go!
Act 3. Let's talk about feelings and fantasy on designing movement, change, and the other world.
Yes,
Sigríður Soffía, choreographer and creator of Fire Flowers. A dancer, acrobat, and holding a master's in business administration, Sigríður Soffía is currently working with Fireworks and Flora. From singing one of the lead roles in the Opéra de Rune in France, dancing at Paris Fashion Week, to choreographing a dance performance for 3 tons of fireworks in the center of Iceland's capital, Sigríður Soffía explores movement in all its forms and mediums.
Yeah, so that's me. Hey! So I will tone the ringmaster down a bit and try to be myself. This is a bottle of wine. It's called the Icelandic Spritz. It's made from a flower called chrysanthemum. And it says on the bottle, liquid choreography, bottled by ballerinas in Iceland. All ingredients are hand-picked by contemporary dancers, and it's the drink that will make you dance, because we promise original dance moves on the 3rd class. So why is a choreographer making this drink? And in order to answer that question, I will talk about feelings and fantasy. And I will tell you my story, which begins. I was in the Arts Academy, and I learned to be a dancer and choreographer. I really love dancing because I have so much energy, and I really need to get it out. I went into the dance department, and then I graduated. And then I started to do dance pieces, and I did theater. And I've worked as a dancer and choreographer in Iceland. And then I went to Brussels, and I was based in Brussels in France for 5 years. And then I started making my own performances. And I really loved making theater because I love the magic. I love the thought of something better and bigger. And just so many things interest me. So many things. And I love fireworks. I've always loved fireworks. I love everything about them. I love the sparkles and the glitters, and I love the boom, and I especially like when the bass notes of the explosions like hit your body and you really feel like and I love this idea of something huge, something bigger than me, that somebody else is controlling this ridiculous game that we're in. And just this, like the concept of fireworks for me is so interesting. It's a brown paper box that you have on the ground, and then you put fire, and then it explodes into something magnificent, 200 meters up in the sky. So, I wanted to make a dance performance with fireworks. And long story short, I made the Menningarnætur flugeldasýningar, which is the biggest firework display in Iceland. And I made 3 shows in Iceland. And the fireworks shows are made exactly like I do choreography. But the only difference is that the sky is the stage and the dancer is the light. So instead of choreographing something for a woman in a yellow dress, I just choreograph something for a yellow light. You see where I'm going with this? Or yeah? Okay. I feel making a fireworks show is kind of like making a tap dance piece. Are you into tap dancing? Or maybe this is not a good reference because this is a designing audience, but like in tap dance you go like ga-ga-ga-ga-ga, and it's so many things at the same time. So it's basically 10 seconds in a fireworks show is a lot of stuff just squeezed into 10 seconds. So I really like fireworks. I did the 3 shows, and then I did a show in Barcelona. And it was the biggest show I had ever done, and I was actually the representative of Iceland, a pyrotechnician from Iceland. And on the Barceloneta beach, I had 2 million people watching the show. And with fireworks shows, nobody knows how they are supposed to be, because it's just in my head, and then I write it down, because nobody wants to use computer programs, so it's just a pencil and a paper. And then the pyrotechnician that makes the skotstjóri in Icelandic, and then it just explodes. So I had planned to have this moment, like this soft moment in the middle of the show. My performance, like firework performances, are considered very feminine because they have like a climax. So instead of putting everything in the same spot and going, ga-ga-ga-ga-ga, then I'm doing like a, you know where I'm going? So anyways, I had planned this moment, and I found this firework called Baby's Breath. And I thought, okay, nice, Baby's Breath, sounds great. Like, sounds great, because you need to know the material before you use it. And I didn't see really the movement qualities, but it kind of sounded nice. So I just bought 130 cases of Baby's Breath, and I just lined them up on the beach. And then this moment came, and I pictured it like a symphony. And of course, you can't have a general rehearsal with fireworks shows, because that would be so expensive. So I stood there, and then this moment comes, and it's like, here we go, my proudest moment. And then I just hear like, and it was totally not nice. And I was just standing there like, but of course nobody knew how it was supposed to be, so I was just like, yes, this is great, we are happy. And it's like, why Baby's Breath? This sounded more like Baby's Tantrum or insane child in bonus trying to get the sleigh-o, you know. Anyways, I was so curious, like, why would this be the name of this firework? Because usually they have like a complex naming system saying like Black Dahlia with thousands of salutes or like something basic where you understand, you know. So I go to the beach and I find, after the show, and I find this burnt box. And then I see that on the box it says, like a Latin name. Turns out that baby's breath is just the name of a flower. It's like the white flower that is often used in weddings. And then I kind of understood that this firework was actually just making like a bush of these white flowers in the sky. So it was actually quite descriptive. And then I looked at my catalog and I realized all of the firework names are actually flowers and trees from Asian origin. And I was like, is this a coincidence? So I started asking all the firework people I know, like, is there any connection between fireworks and flowers? And they were like, nope. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I just, all of a sudden, I had like a deep interest in gardening. And I was just buying flower books, and I was finding flower farmers on Instagram, and I was buying seeds, and I was growing, and I thought, this is not my artistic career, this is just me being middle-aged. But it didn't like leave, so I was always just looking at the shapes and these beautiful shapes, and then I realized that this might be the same thing. And I finally found the Pyrotechnician's Bible, some proof, the proof I needed. A book that was last published in 1970, and it's very expensive. Got it on Amazon, very happy. On the first page it says, in 1585, the word hanabi was first used. Hana means fire, and bi means flower. So in Japan, they talk about flowers of fire. This is very basic there, but this has somehow gotten lost in translation. So we talk about fireworks, and in Iceland we say flugeldar. But all fireworks were originally designed to imitate certain flowers. And this is so amazing if we break it down. So some guy in Japan was basically just walking like, and he saw this flower, like chrysanthemum, like, oh my God, this flower is so nice. I want to make a sculpture out of fire. I want to make a flower that's 250 meters tall, up in the sky, and it's going to explode in the perfect symmetry. I can imagine that his friends and parents were like, sure, you're going to make a flower of fire. But he actually did it. He just did a lot of experiments, and then now we're doing fireworks all the time. But we kind of got it wrong, because in Japan, fireworks were originally designed to pay tribute to nature, to point out the most magnificent trees and flowers. And just as a demonstration, I'm going to show you 3 of my favorite flowers, fire flowers. So I'm going to do a 4-inch chrysanthemum. Boom! Boom! And it's kind of like long leaves. Then there's the sakura. Boom! Boom! It's like small pink flowers. It's imitating the cherry blossom. And then my ultimate favorite, the Nisiki Kamuro, or the weeping willow. I'm going to do a 10-inch, and if you can just imagine the glitter. 10-inch fireworks goes 250 meters up, and when it explodes, it's 2 times this building, Harpan. It's big. So, 10-inch, here we go. Boom! Boom! Do you know which firework this is? It's so pretty. So, then I was thinking, okay, if fireworks and flowers are the same thing, could I then grow a fireworks show? Could I collect all the seeds and all the varieties and make a performance where I would do exactly the same score with display fireworks and flowers? And that became this flower installation, which was like a stream of flowers in the city of Reykjavik. And it has been here for 4 years. And it's basically a choreographed slow-motion fireworks show of flowers. So you can visit the flower bed anytime during the summer, and most likely there's always something new. And then I wanted to have a grand finale also. So I had to make like a seating program. So I'm not going to go into that. If you want to talk about seating programs and seating schedules, I'm your girl. So then COVID hit, and I was like, oh, I'm a dancer, the theater's closed. How can I get art to someone? And then I had this idea. What if I make a do-it-yourself, like your own little fireworks show in a box? So I took all the seeds from the original art piece, and I dug up the tubers, and with specialists, because of course I cannot do this alone, because I'm great at having ideas, not maybe the best one to execute the ideas. So I had a great team, and together we made this, and now for 4 years, I all of a sudden have a flower company. I totally don't have time, but I love it. All of this is displayed in Hönnunarsafn Íslands now on DesignMarch, and that's basically like stepping into my mind, and each wall is like this shape-shifting project. But now we get some feelings, because when I'm doing this performance, I do my MBA, and then I have a baby. And so I have a baby that's 14 months old, and I'm doing the MBA, and then all of a sudden we have COVID, and then I'm diagnosed with breast cancer. And that was so not nice. And I was just like, wow, when it rains, it really pours. So I had to stop all projects, and I had been like building up my artistic career, and I was really like working on like making it as an artist. And then all of a sudden, I'm just doing chemo, and I'm just like a person in a movie, you know, sitting in a chair. And it was like, what is happening? And still, I have a kid, and life doesn't pause if you have cancer. Everything just moves. And all of a sudden, I'm just on the sidelines, and my hair falls off, and everything falls off. And I'm just filled with toxic chemicals, fearing for my life. And the only project I could do was this fire flowers, because I loved being in the mud, because it's very slow art, and it's like slow and nice, and then you just see something evolving, and it's hope. And so I was lying in bed for 2 years, looking at the ceiling, and I was thinking, if I get better, I am going to do everything I can think of that's fun. I'm going to do all the most ridiculous projects. I'm going to wear the biggest, most ridiculous dresses. I will drink all of the best champagne. I will laugh, and I will only hang out with inspiring, lovely people. And then I just thought, and nothing happened. And it was a moment of complete silence in my life, and I had nothing to give. And I didn't even understand why my friends bothered to show, because I was born an entertainer. My role in life is to entertain. And if I can't entertain, then what am I doing? And I had this moment where I realized, and this is very sad to be 36 and realizing this, but nobody gives a shit about what I do in my work life. They really don't care if my projects are good or bad, but they actually care about me, and that I am loved, not my production level. So I hope this could maybe be a little inspiration into your life to do all the projects that you burn for doing. Because that's giving you energy, not taking it. So I got better, and I read somewhere you live 2 lives. Your first life, and then the life that you live after you realize you're mortal. And I realized that I am mortal, which is very disturbing, because my time is like this on this earth. And I better go, 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 go. So now I'm doing all the projects. I'm enjoying life. Everybody's like, oh, you're so close to burning out. I'm like, no, no, no. This is me being normal. Enjoy. And it's so freeing. So I did this project, and I realized, because I thought, I'm a dancer, I'm so healthy. I eat great food, I do great things. I try to do the sustainability and the flokka rusl, and I'm in all the correct things. And I'm getting cancer? Really? And I just didn't get it. And then I started looking into the food industry. Oh my God, can we all look at the food industry? Everything has cancer carcinogens. It's completely normal to stuff everything with color, with all of these chemicals that you all know about. I'm not going to go into the details. You know what I'm talking about. But to realize that I thought I was doing everything healthy, turns out that I'm not. And then I decided to make this drink as a comment. So on the outside, this looks as like a fun little project, colorful, nice, drinking flowers. But it's really like, this drink should not have an 8-year shelf life. And I said, I would like my drink to contain as little of sugar and rótvarnarefni, the preservatives as possible. And we've been pushing in all production, how can we just make this as healthy? Of course, wine is not healthy. But I believe that we can do nice things just in a minimal way. We don't have to quit everything. We just have to find the correct way to do it. I did a perfume because I thought, I'm going to do the perfume and the drink of my future. I'm going to do something that I would love to drink. And originally, I wanted to do champagne, but I don't have a vineyard, so that was an obstacle. So anyways, this is a really simple project, really, because it's just a dance performance that became a fireworks show that became a flower installation that turned into 3 products that make you dance. So, what I want to leave you with what I would like to leave you with is what do I want to leave you with? Actually, so many things. I want to leave you with thinking about life and how short it is. And I might look like I'm doing something really fun and bubbly, but that's a decision. Because life is scary and it's filled with anxiety. And I can choose to ignore it and entertain while I know what's going on. And when I was sick, I all of a sudden understood how important the entertainment industry is. Because I just yearned for having a moment without worries. I was fantasizing about worrying about something else than dying. So I actually wrote a poem saying, like, I cannot wait until the year 2024 will be, and my main concern will be, oh no, I have nothing to wear. Or like, oh no, this deadline in my work. This is not a reason to get stressed. So please enjoy this festival. Enjoy your company. Reach out and enjoy life. Go, go, go! And now I'm your ringmaster again. Let me hear you!
Hrund Gunnsteinsdóttir, author, speaker, filmmaker, and sustainability leader. A firm believer that change starts from within, Hrund draws from broad-based global experience ranging from sustainable businesses, post-conflict reconstruction and development, filmmaking, and the arts, to various roles in the private and public sectors where she has led innovative projects.
Góðan daginn. Hi, it's great to be with you here today. And what a morning, what a first part of the day this has been. So much inspiration, and I keep thinking the world needs more of people like you here in this room and the people who are watching online. You are people who understand and can imagine what the world would look like if we didn't have intuition. What happens when we numb it or close it down? You are people who understand the superpowers that come with intuition and trust its process. But I also think we all need to be reminded of what intuition is and why it's important in today's world. These reminders have to do with the noise that we are surrounded with. And I've had conversations with some of the speakers here today about the noise, a distraction that is constantly hijacking our attention to something that lies external to us. But there is also so much in our societies and systems and culture and the way that we put criteria for success or acceptance that don't support us in following our intuition. And if you think about it, do you feel personally in your life that there is an encouragement for you to take the time off to disconnect from the external world and really connect within? It's becoming much more rare. So my work has spanned different sectors and professions. I've worked in post-conflict reconstruction, innovation, investment, international development, filmmaking like we heard before, and so on and so forth. And the red thread in all of this has been intuition for over 20 years. Very early on, I found out for myself that I felt like we were in some way serving systems instead of systems serving people and the planet. I was one of those early this century who really felt it, that we needed to rethink the systems that we are in. And it's kind of like a big task, you know, it's not a simple one. But I also realized that systems don't change themselves, people change systems. So in a way, systemic change is always going to be deeply personal. So there are many definitions of intuition, and the more that I started to explore the human spirit and what happens inside us and how do we make change happen from within, the more that I conversed with people all over the world, mostly in English, and the more research I did, I realized that we have very many different definitions of intuition. So in a way, it's on a continuum of two extremes. On the one extreme, we have definitions saying that intuition is an irrational impulse and you should do everything you can not to listen to it. And then on the other extreme of the continuum, we have ideas and definitions that say that intuition is our gateway into the spirit world. It's a sixth sense, or worse, it's a woo-woo that we should never rely on because it hasn't been backed up by science. And then somewhere in between of these two extremes, I also found really rigorous, amazing, inspiring research that shows that speaks into mental agility, like why it's important, what happens when we combine intuition and reason, logic and creativity, that these are not separate things, and intuition is so fundamental to our intelligence and ability to create, as you all know. So I kind of came back home to my roots, as we often do. Icelandic is my mother tongue. I come from Iceland. And I started to look at the Icelandic word for intuition, which is innsæi. Because words are magical. They frame, they reframe our thinking, and they deframe our thinking too. And what I really love about innsæi, the Icelandic word, is that it holds space both for the poetic and the spiritual, which will always be the home of our consciousness, and then also for the very literal, concrete, and scientific around our consciousness and intuition. So the Icelandic word for intuition, innsæi, is made up of two words, in and sæi. In means inside or into, and sæi means to see or the sea within. So the way that we have worked with the Icelandic word is to propose a threefold meaning. First of all is the sea within. It's the flow of our consciousness. It's this ever-moving, dynamic sea within us that is constantly making new connections and does so at a much greater speed than our conscious mind could ever comprehend. Intuition brings together information from our whole body, so intuition is always embodied, but we tend to live very much in our head. Sorry. Yeah, so shutting down parts of our brains and rooting ourselves inside our bodies, which, for example, happens in a state of flow, enables us to align with intuition. And in those conditions, in this position of mind, we can reach our highest level of performance and our highest potential. So the sea within is this world of imagination, ideas, discoveries, sense of direction, meaning, and purpose. And the sea within cannot be put into boxes, because then it ceases to flow. And to live in line with the world that we live in that is constantly changing and flowing, it's so important to also understand how we constantly change and flow. I loved the way that Hrund Gunnsteinsdóttir talked about this morning, about how she's observing the world, her community, through drawing it and making these images for us. She is representing the world we live in with her images. But she also had this conflict thinking, I am observing it, but I also want to be in it. So there's this great tendency for us to explain the world and organize it and categorize it and manipulate the world we live in, because we need that in order to survive. But maybe we have sometimes taken it to the extreme. The second meaning of insight is to see within. It's how we introspect. It's our ability to know ourselves well enough to be able to put ourselves into other people's shoes. It's our ability to understand what is good intuition from our biases, our fears, our wishful thinkings, prejudices and judgments. And then thirdly, intuition means to see from the inside out. And that has to do with how we wayfind and navigate in the world today with a well-harnessed intuition that is our compass. So I'm on a quest to get more people to align with their intuition, because I think our lives depend on it. Not only because it's key to our mental health, our well-being, our ability to thrive, but it is also fundamental to our intelligence, our genius, our creativity, which you all know so well. And I think we really need to mindfully harness our intuition and align with it, because as I said before, there is very little in our community, in our societies, that encourages us to do that. Like me, you have undoubtedly been in situations whether it's school or workplace or whatever, where you encounter the view that intuition is way too fluffy and philosophical to tackle some of the greatest challenges that we are faced with in the world today. But we know it's not, because it's actually very solid, because it is our connection with the real world that we live in. And there's another thing I want to share with you, is that we often tend to think that it's divorced from reason or analysis, but it's actually our ability to reason well depends on us having a good intuition. We need good intuition to innovate, to take good decisions, and to love life. So for the global challenges that we are faced with in the world today, we have the technology, we have the scientific knowledge, and we have the collective resources to be able to materialize sustainable ways of living. But what is missing is the mentality. It happens here. It all happens in the mind, and therefore all in the body, because intuition and intelligence is always embodied. Christiana Figueres, the main negotiator of the Paris Climate Agreement, has said that the only way out of the mess that we are in the world today is to go inwards, to connect deeply with our spirituality and humanity. And that the state of the world, the state of our economy in the current form, reflects a chronic neglect of our inner world. And this is actually a very big thing to say, coming from somebody who is leading some of our biggest organizations in the world, or was leading some of our biggest organizations in the world, which is the UN. So what matters now is the quality of mind, because everything is doable. We can do basically whatever we want to see happen. But the quality of mind in humans is so important. That is the power invested in the human capacity to enhance or suppress life on Earth. So I thought about a story to share with you today, like what does it look like when we are deeply connected with intuition? And I thought about the ancient Polynesian navigators. Hundreds of years ago, Actually, their story started about 3,000 years ago. The ancient Polynesian navigators were able to map almost the entire Pacific Ocean without any of the modern tools now available to us. The Pacific Ocean is the largest ocean on planet Earth. And compare that to the fact that today we know about 5 to 20% of the world's ocean. The reason why they were able to do this was because they were deeply connected with their intuition, and they were deeply connected and immersed in the real world, in the natural world where they lived. They had the courage to go into uncharted territory because they trusted their knowledge, which they inherited through the generations. Their genius also lay in their ability to connect the macro to the micro. So they could read into the waves in the ocean. They could read into the clouds and the behavior of birds, and they could see if there was a shadow on a cloud in the distance, which meant that there was probably an island below. They could also name at least 300 stars in the night sky, which they navigated by. What is also important about their genius is that generation after generation, they would teach that it's important to have hands-on experience about the world we live in, because the world is always changing, the oceans are always changing, and so are we with it. So they had this kind of mantra, which we can adjust to the world we live in today. And it's this: if you can read the world you live in, if you can see the possible in your mind, you will never get lost. I've had the privilege to work with leaders in the world and change makers, whom we have all been very inspired by the Polynesian wayfinders. And we're thinking about how we can change the systems that we are within, and how do we do it with a new mindset, so not with the old mindset. And so we thought about how can we navigate with different stars that we are looking at. What are the stars that we would like to navigate with, metaphorically speaking? And so far, it's been a very inspiring and amazing process, but we also realized that we have a long way to go. So this morning, we woke up to the same moon and stars as the ancient Polynesian navigators. But the difference between us and them is that we would never go far without a GPS. We would hardly go far outside of this building without our smartphones, right? And besides, about 1/3 of humanity can't even see the stars in the Milky Way in the night sky anymore because of pollution. Now that's both a fact, but it's also a metaphor for our growing disconnect with the natural and the real world that we're living in. And it is so evident in how wildly we have overused our natural resources, to the extent that planet Earth is losing her stability and her ability to renew its energy. As you know, any talk about intuition or creativity always brings us to the word attention. And we're going through some serious attention crisis in the world today. And it's affecting us deeply and in many ways. I said before that intuition is an embodied knowledge, and we pay attention with all our bodies. During every minute of every day, our bodies take in millions and billions of data and sensory data that we process. Our very focused minds get about 1% of this information. The rest, 95 to 99%, sinks into the sea within us, where our unconsciousness is working really, really hard to make these connections. And sometimes some of these connections come to the surface in the form of ideas or realizations or some kind of feeling for something is right or not right. So it's important to take ownership of how we pay attention, because the way we pay attention to the world is a moral act. What we put in, we project onto the world, we put out again. So it's important to be in control, to be the captain of our own attention. And we actually need to be careful not to be trash bins, right? So just to sit there and wait for anything to be thrown our way without scrutinizing what it is. There are trillion-dollar businesses out there that are very keen to maintain our attention, scrolling throughout the day without thinking what we're putting in. But at the same time, this is actually shaping our perceptions of the world, our feeling for sense of belonging and what is real and what is not real. Our attention shapes human history. Connecting hearts to head could be a cliché, but I don't think it's an overused statement. It's really referring to the fact that our whole bodies and being are intelligent, and it's important that we apply all of us. Because if we are able to connect within, with our humanity and spirituality, we connect differently with other people and the world around us. How we wayfind is hugely important. So my work is very much about thinking like, how can we shift the center of gravity in how we show up, how we use our intelligence, where we are coming from. When I see you and you see me, do you see me? Do I see you? These are all really relevant questions for the world we live in. And creativity is a mindset. It's not a skill. And that's why your expertise is so important for the global challenges that we are faced with. Because sharing a mindset is different from sharing a skill, right? So for example, when we truly see other people, when we are connected within, when we are not merely representing the world, we are being present in it, our brains open up. We become better listeners, we become more creative, and we begin to be able to truly see other people. So we begin to listen to them deeply, and they feel that, they can sense that in our presence with them. And so they begin to trust us more, and they are more willing to share with us unformed thoughts, intuitions that are coming to the surface. They don't feel pressured to share something in a 1-minute elevator pitch. I know you all know this feeling. So intuition is often very hard to express in words and is something detailed, but it's a question of how we listen. So I realized that I'm slightly beyond my time, so I'm just going to run over a few things here. This is the difference between being a mechanical heart and somebody who connects brain to heart. In my new book about intuition and insight, I interview some of the most extraordinary people in the world today. And I wanted to share with you a story of Enric Sala. Enric is an explorer of the ocean. He grew up by the coast in Spain, and he always dreamt of becoming an ocean explorer like Jacques Cousteau. He went to university, he got a degree, he became a professor at a university in Spain in marine biology, until one day he woke up and realized that he was writing an obituary about the ocean life. He was seeing the destruction of the ocean, he was just witnessing how things had become totally unsustainable, and he felt like he was doing nothing about it. He used to think that it was enough to know the science and then he would share it and that would change people's behavior, but it didn't. So he resigned from academia, and Enric decided to spend most of his time swimming in the ocean, diving in the ocean, to get to know it firsthand like the ancient Polynesian navigators. He wanted to develop his intuition about the world's oceans. And since then, he and his team have been able to preserve 26 of the biggest marine areas in the world, covering 6.5 square kilometers. And he's been able to convince national leaders to do just that. And we all know how hard it is, because we do have the scientific evidence, but we're not doing enough. And this last piece I want to share with you is the reason why he and his team have been able to move national leaders to action. It is because they have brought them to see with their own eyes, experience firsthand what the ocean looks like. And that is what it means to put ourselves back into the world, to be connected with our intuition, to be part of life, to be really present in the world we live in, and then change it for the better. Thank you so much.
Oh, close.
Robert Thiemann, interior architect, former editor of Frame magazine, and founder of Betterness. The spatial consultancy Betterness is driven by Robert's passion for better built environments that allows people and society to thrive, yet minimizing its impact on nature. Having co-founded Frame Interior Design Architecture magazine in 1997, Robert just recently stepped down from his role as co-director and editor-in-chief.
Hello, I'm Robert. And I'm not an interior architect, to put that right from the beginning. That's what I'm not. But what I am is the main reason why your program today got disrupted. I was traveling from Amsterdam with my former Frame colleague, Tracy Ingram, and the speakers that will appear just after me from Atelier NL, Loni and Annette. And we were traveling from Amsterdam to Reykjavik yesterday. We were at the airport 1 p.m. waiting for the 2 p.m. flight, and it got delayed and cancelled. So in the end, 7 p.m. Dutch time, we spent all afternoon in the airport, Schiphol Airport, not the best place to be for such a long time. We learned that we would need to fly to Reykjavik via Oslo today, this morning. Very early, 7 a.m. in the morning. We all decided to stay at Schiphol Airport. Were put in a lovely hotel, Citizen M. I walked from Schiphol Airport to the hotel, spent literally 3 minutes outside, slept, got up, walked back to the airport, got the flight to Oslo, took the second flight to Reykjavik, Keflavik, walked into a taxi, was put just in front of here, on the ground again, entered this building at 11 a.m. Icelandic time, 1 p.m. my time, noticing that I had literally spent almost 24 hours inside. And just before we entered the taxi at the airport, Tracy and I said to each other, it feels like we've been traveling to New Zealand. It was such a drag, and it took such a long time, and it made us so tired. And that is the reason why we need to make every space matter. We spend so much time inside, and it's so important that the quality of the spaces that we are in is good, is beneficial to us in the first place, that I want to spend 25 minutes with you talking about this subject. And no, I'm not an interior architect, but I used to edit a magazine called Frame for 26 years. Hrund's daughter, who I met during lunchtime today, I think she wasn't even 26 years old. So it's been really, literally a lifetime that I've been editing Frame. And during that period, we at Frame accumulated so much expertise by simply looking at spaces, talking with interior designers, interviewing architects, thinking, curating, writing, that at the end we got to 5 basic principles to make really meaningful spaces, spaces that matter. And I'm going to share these principles with you today. The dancing lady, I forgot her name, sorry about that. Sigríður Soffía. You spoke about design sparking hope, designers sparking hope. I completely agree. That's why I love this industry. I love to be surrounded by people, and that's why I called my new venture, because I left Frame at the beginning of this year, Betterness. And if you look for a website, betterness.space, because I want to talk and to work about spaces. So, 26 years of spatial intelligence accumulated at Frame informed me about what is needed to make meaningful spaces, and well, I'm trying to build up a consultancy where I empower brands to envision, design, and build meaningful spaces in a world that is in constant flux, beautifully explained by Hrund just before me. How can you do that? How can you arrive at meaningful spaces? Well, first of all, you need to forget about trends, because trends are short-lived. There's always a new trend around the corner. There are trend agencies, and they are coming up with trends every so many weeks. And before you know it, you completely lost track. You're working with one trend, and there's another trend, and then you're working with that trend, and there's yet another trend. And wow, it's so much. And you can get completely lost by all of this so-called useful information. So we need longevity. And I believe, and this is also backed up by former speakers today, that we need to look at basic human needs. They inform, they shape design in the end. So they are universal, and they don't change over time, just like trends. What are the basic human needs that designers always need to keep in mind? Well, first of all, safety. Mental safety, physical safety, that's the beginning and the end of life. If we don't feel safe, we cannot function properly. Second of all, and I've heard this a couple times now since I've been here, which was quite late, so I've heard it relatively often, people are looking for a sense of belonging. You belong to a family, but you also want to belong to perhaps a club, an association, a company that you work for, or a community like a design community that you want to be part of. You want to connect with others. And third of all, and it's getting lost in translation here on this slide, we want to really strive towards self-actualization, for the lack of a better word. I couldn't find a better word for it. We want to become our whole self. We want to be who we are in all kinds of ways, in ways of how we dress, how we talk, how we behave, how we design our spaces. But we live in a world that is in constant flux, and that is shaping spatial design too. We have all the time changing economic conditions, price hikes, inflation, supply chain disruption, you name it, it's always there. There are heavy environmental changes. Think climate change, think a loss of biodiversity, which we need to bring back. Rewilding is mentioned today. There is societal pressure, and it has become much stronger over the past couple of years because it's much more shared, these pressures. We want equality between men and women, for instance, between races also. Inclusion, everybody wants to be included. We strive for sustainability, we want to have freedom. All of this is pressured by society. And there's always scientific progress. There's always a new technology. The technology of the year this time is AI. Last year was the metaverse. And I believe that AI is here to stay. I'm not particularly sure about the metaverse yet. And there's always new materials on the scene. And those technologies and new materials, they also inform how and what we design. So let's talk spaces. And I'll share some basic truths with you about spaces. Well, today for me was extreme. I think I ended up 99.5% spending inside, but on average, we spend 90% of our lives indoors. Wherever we are and whatever we do, interiors engage our senses. They offer physical and mental experiences to us digital-first beings. But the impact of these experiences on our health and well-being differs per individual. It's different per person, how you experience the impact of sound or light or whatever, certain material, smells, then nobody really owns any space. But everybody is responsible for taking care of them for future generations. Constructing and furbishing spaces impact, exhaust the planet we live on. And the last truth about spaces is that the world's population grows faster than the construction of affordable and livable spaces. Well, that's painting quite a grim picture, but then again, I call myself not a designer, but I operate in design, so I'm hopeful. And if you put all of this together, it means that more than ever, we need to make every space matter. But how do we get there? Well, let's go back to these basic human needs. So safety, belonging, and self-actualization in a world in constant flux. And we combine that with these 6 truths about spaces. That leads to 5 principles to arrive at meaningful environments that are relatively future-proof. So I'm going to walk you through these 5 principles with each 3 examples, just random examples, how you can use these principles in your design practice, or if you work for a brand, how you can use these principles for your brand, etc. And even if you're a graphic designer or a dancer, you will find some useful information to take away here, because, as I said, all of us, on average, spend 90% of our lives indoors. Oh, first principle. We need to prioritize the health and well-being of the users of spaces. We need to support people to thrive at what they do. Well, how do you get there? Get the biophilic basics right. And biophilics are, if you think about it, access to sunlight, access to nature, clean water, clean air. And those are the basics, but then you can further and think about materials, you can think about forms, you can think about color, all derived from nature. A good example of that, what that could look like, is this headquarters of a company that you probably all know. It's Booking.com in Amsterdam. This is the headquarters in Amsterdam. It was built last year, just opened. And if you look at this image, you see a space that is filled with daylight, where there's a lot of plants, there's a lot of wood, there's a lot of natural materials being used. So this is an example of a biophilic space. Second example, how to prioritize health and well-being. Empower autonomy and self-expression. Offer opportunities for people to personalize space, the products they find in the space, and media. If you can personalize whatever you find, you feel a sense of belonging, and you feel empowered to be yourself. A good example of this is this small office in Amsterdam, where you find these really strange shapes. And they are not designed for any specific purpose. They are designed for people working there to take over these objects, to take over these spaces, to have meetings there, official meetings, chance encounters, to put their bikes somewhere, to put plants somewhere, to sit with their laptops. They can use these spaces in any way they see fit. And if they do so, they feel empowered to be themselves at the max, to the max. And the third way to arrive at a healthy space is to understand the atypical. We're all different, we know that, but we don't always acknowledge that in whatever we create. So if you're a designer of spaces or you empower others to design spaces, it's good to keep this in mind. You need to create empathetic and inclusive spaces that benefit all of society, so not one specific user group. An example, this is a religious space in England, and it's designed for not one specific religion, but for any religion. Let's call it a spiritual place. So it's not meant to be used by Islamic people. It's not meant to be used only by Christians. It's not meant to be used only by Hindus. No, it's meant to be used by all of these religions, and therefore it lacks certain design codes from each of these individual religions, but it does create a sacred space for all of them. Second principle, that's a no-brainer, minimize your impact on the planet. That means that you need to champion circularity, adaptability, and longevity. There we go with the 3 examples. Embrace circularity. How do you do that? Well, think about the 7 R's. I found 7 R's. Rethink, refuse, reduce, reuse, repair, regift, recycle. All of the re's. Keep them in mind. Well, rethink, what does it mean? I can talk 20 minutes about this slide only. I'm not going to do that, but, or maybe I should. No, let's not do it. Rethink is if you get a commission to build a new building, like this one, for instance, is it actually really necessary to create a new building? Or can the goal of the client be achieved with a building that already exists? And didn't the client think about that? So you can rethink the commission. You can even refuse the commission, saying, no, I'm not going to design what you asked me to. I see a better option in doing nothing or doing something else. Well, etc., etc. The rest you understand. So what that could look like is what you see on this image. This is a store in China, a fashion store in China, built with basically scrap material. It's not of any specific worth, but it has been designed and assembled in such a way that all of the components can be reused for another store, an office, a home, or whatever. There's no glue, there's only screws. As I said, there are basic materials. And if you are a creative designer, you can still make that store look really cool. At least that's what we at Frame thought at the moment when we published it. Second way to arrive at a more sustainable space is to commit to a zero waste policy, to make waste work, and that is a true possibility. You're looking at a stack of waste here, and part of that waste, which is to be found at around the sea on the Jeju Island in South Korea, is collected and reused in what's also on these images, and that is a fashion store of a sustainable outdoor fashion brand from Korea. Again, it takes a talented designer to make the entire space look good, but it's possible. And yeah, do you agree it looks good, or do you think it looks like shit? Well, then better get used to this new kind of aesthetic, because you will see it much more around. This not so polished aesthetic where things perhaps have greenish, brownish, grayish colors, where shapes are not perfect, and you see furniture that you have seen before because it has been used before and has been upcycled. Well, these are all ways to reuse waste to make waste work, and to create less impact on the planet. And the last way I want to share with you is to transition to biomaterials, because we can take from nature and use it, but then again, we also need to give back to nature what we take from it. And you can do that in a really highly commercial context. For instance, this optician in London, where designers used mycelium as a material, and corn starch, also a biomaterial, to create a relatively unique appearance for this optician. I'm challenging you to find any other optician that looks more or less like this. And to top the entire experience off, lots of materials were reused. There's biodegradable plastic being used there. So it's almost a store that you can eat. Chapter 3, Principle 3, foster togetherness. We all want to feel connected to somebody else, to a community, because we strive for a sense of belonging and a sense of ownership. First example, co-create with, back on track, co-create with user communities to give them a sense of ownership and belonging. This image shows how you can do that, and it's not very noteworthy, I'd say, but it is, because this is a retail store that is run by a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. That is an organization that lives in the digital spheres that you can become a member of, that you can sort of sign up to by buying an NFT. And if you do so, you are partly owner of this retail store next to many other people. And you can vote via NFT memberships about all relevant aspects of this store. Build community, connect people. Yeah, I see you walking. Yeah.
I told them earlier that if you go over time, I will do a BAM.
Okay. Well,
I don't want to make you panic, but...
Throw the bomb. Yeah, Miu Miu in Milan last week, a literary club for women to build community. You can share spaces and products in co-living environments, co-working environments, co-owning cars, etc. Student housing, going really fast now. Not very inspiring anymore, but the bomb has been dropped, so yeah, what can you do? 4, anticipate change. Enable spaces to adapt to changing times with different needs. Design for disassembly. It's becoming really ridiculous, this. Keep flexibility in mind. Keep deconstruction in mind when you design for flexibility. Yeah, this was also on show last week in Milan. 10 Corso Como, the famous concept store. First floor, totally renewed by 2050 Plus studio. Love it. Totally the opposite of the ground floor. Retail museum. This will never become a museum. This is an ever-changing place for events, for product launches, for workshops, etc. Fantastic. Think modular, shorten lead times, lower costs, increase freedom. This is a store in China. You see it. I don't need to explain a lot. It's built out of modules. You can do anything you want with these modules. Reuse them. Create an event space. Create a retail space. Look in the mirror. Be beautiful. Embed ambiguity. Leave room for change and interpretation. What is this? This is a home. No, it's a gallery. No, it's a home. No, it's a gallery. It's both. It's a home and a gallery. There's no specific sign of this being a home. There's no specific sign of this being a gallery. It's an ambiguous space. You can use it in any way you see fit. Ambiguity leaves room for flexibility. 5, last chapter. Create experiences. We all crave experiences. Make them memorable. purposeful, enriching. How to do that? Engage the senses. But be meaningful, so add value, and mindful. We are not all the same. Some are neurotypical, some are neurodiverse. This is a bakery in the south of France. The baker is baking in the shop, beautiful smells. You enter the store, fantastic, I want to buy a croissant, a baguette. You buy into a souvenir of this fantastic experience, but it's so connected with the baking process. I love it. It's undetachable. Empower escapism, because we all want to also experience joy, fireworks, magic, fireworks, wonder. Being here in Reykjavik, 24 after departure. This is an event space for Maison Margiela, conceptualized by its creative director, John Galliano, and you're looking at a cinema. If you enter this space, you're not in a fashion realm anymore. No, you're in a universe of magic and wonder. You're taking back to forlorn times, and you just enjoy. And the last experience, very cool, go phygital, physical plus digital, and in doing so, enable people to share their experience with others. This is a pop-up store for digital fashion. It exists, seemingly. It's the last example. No more bombs. No more bombs. I see you from the corner of my eye. Hold your horses. So this is a physical space for digital fashion. Use your iPhone, make photos of yourself wearing digital fashion, share it with others. Bob's your uncle, lecture is over. 5 principles summarized here. Make a picture, ask me more questions afterwards. Thank you very much.
James Merry, designer and visual artist. James is a visual artist known for his exceptional hand embroidery, mask making, and jewelry. He has collaborated with institutions such as the V&A, Gucci, the Royal School of Needlework, Tim Walker, Tilda Swinton, Opening Ceremony, and Iris van Herpen. James is also a longtime collaborator with Björk on her visual output.
Hello everyone. It's great to be here. I'm going to go quickly because I'm scared of that balloon. So I thought I would talk just quickly today about my output over the last nine years, I guess. And to do that, I split my output into these different categories. And what I want to do today is just explain a little bit about how each one kind of evolved out of the other, quite naturally and spontaneously, I guess. So it starts with embroidery, which is kind of where I always end up coming back to. And I still describe myself as an embroidery artist, even though that's probably the thing I spend least of my time doing nowadays. But everything always kind of comes back to that for me somehow. But the embroidery led onto a lot of work with wire, which was kind of replacing the thread, I guess. And the wire work evolved naturally into a lot of work with metal, mostly with brass and copper, and then eventually learning a lot of silversmithing and metal techniques with that. And alongside all of this, I was sometimes sculpting in clay and silicon, just giving things more 3 dimensions. And that ended up informing a lot of the 3D printing stuff that I've been doing more recently. And I think learning all the 3D softwares and starting to sculpt digitally, it kind of lent itself quite naturally to turning a lot of my masks into augmented reality filters. And then alongside all of that, I probably won't have time to talk about it today, but there's also been some illustration. quite often it's just line drawings, which I think is a continuation of this kind of idea of a thread, maybe, but also stuff with AI and kind of digital illustration. And then I'm going to end with some more kind of objects I've been making more recently. So, to give it all a bit of context, I thought I would just very quickly talk about my collaboration with Björk, because that's kind of the soil that all these other things have kind of grown out of. And these are the 4 albums that I've worked with her on in a kind of variety of roles. But the first one was Biophilia, and I was hired by her in 2009, and she was in the middle of doing really a lot of research for this album, looking into musical education and nature and science and stuff. So I was hired as an assistant and then a kind of research assistant. And that was a really formative few years, I guess, because we were just kind of running around and reading books about nature and science and meeting National Geographic and all these other things. But I think it informed a lot of the way that we still work together, maybe. And it kind of ended up turning into this suite of iPad apps that I got involved with. And it was also the first time I went on tour with her, which is something I've done ever since. Vulnicora was the next album, and that was actually the album where I started making masks. And there was also a lot of virtual reality stuff with this album that I got involved with. And then we also kind of created this exhibition that toured around the world, showing the VR videos. Yeah. The next album was Utopia. And that album, I think, was when I started getting more involved with making things specifically for her to wear for like music videos and album covers and things. And it was also where I started making masks for tour and the musicians on stage. And then the most recent album, Fossora, I maybe started, it was less about making masks and more about kind of making these objects. And between those 2 last albums, we were also touring the Cornucopia tour, which I worked on with all the visuals for that. So, and yeah, that just came to an end just recently. So, I thought I'd just start by mentioning my kind of typical process. I work, this is actually my house here. I think there's a, yes. Really happy about that. So, I live and work on a little mountain just outside Reykjavik, and I just work by myself. I don't have a team or an assistant or anything like that, so it's quite small and isolated, but surrounded by nature, which hopefully you will see kind of ends up in a lot of my work. For example, this piece, which I think is kind of where I marked the start of my creative output in some ways. It was 2015, and I was living in New York. And I think I was just really missing Iceland and was a bit fed up of being stuck in a big city. So I started embroidering Icelandic flowers into all my old jumpers. I was also just trying to revive my wardrobe a bit. It was getting a bit old. But that whole kind of project snowballed, and I ended up making lots and lots of these. And I noticed that they were often kind of seasonal. Like in the autumn, I would be embroidering mushrooms, and in the spring, it would be birds that were returning to the cabin. The best bird in the world, the Hrossaköku. Yeah, and then when I eventually started selling some of these pieces, I would always kind of make sure I went to the store and hand embroidered in situ, because it was important to me just to emphasize the time that goes into hand embroidery, because I think our eyes nowadays are just used to seeing huge areas of machine embroidery. So I was really trying to just show this kind of process and what was involved. I ended up making a lot of these, and they were all different, and I never repeated the same flower, so it was also kind of a weird way of me learning Icelandic nature and plants and birds. I would kind of research each one and then embroider them. And a lot of these companies did reach out to collaborate, or they just copied me. But I was always kind of quite adamant not to actually collaborate officially with any of them. Something about it, the concept for me was kind of almost like doing graffiti on their logos and just working by hand into the machine embroidery. And actually, kind of in the back of my head, I was always thinking if I ever did collaborate with anyone, I would want it to be an Icelandic company. I'd want it to be 66 North, because most of the embroideries were of Icelandic plants and birds. And that did eventually happen. I did my favorite Icelandic flower, Eyrarós, and then I also embroidered the GPS tracking of swans that were migrating between Iceland and England. And the embroidery ended up leading into here. So this was actually the first mask that I made for Björk. It was made in the same year as the embroidered Nike. This was 2015. And I'd actually already been working with Björk for kind of 6 years up until this point. So it was funny to me when people started saying, oh, Björk's mask maker, James Merry, because for me, they were more just like these little side project things I was doing in the evening while I was watching TV. And during the day, we were actually quite busy working on other stuff. But for each album, she often has quite a defined palette of textures and colors. And this one, it was this kind of latex color, this purpley latex and a really bright emergency yellow. And also this kind of creeping, really tenacious Icelandic plants like Björk, which this is. And it was actually a birthday present. It was her birthday when we shot this, so I ended up, for some reason, making this weird kind of latex thing and giving it to her for a birthday present. And then these stockings I embroidered for one of the music videos for Black Lake. They were actually the first thing I embroidered for her. And then when that album went on tour, I ended up kind of on the road making a lot of these masks. I kind of remember the hotel rooms I was in when I was making most of these. But they all kind of had the same character, I guess, this kind of embroidered, romantic, almost kind of Victorian or something feeling to them, but with a kind of techno edge. I wanted to single this mask out just quickly because I think this is when I kind of reached the limitation of the embroidery, and I was really wanting the embroidery to kind of move more freely around the face, and I was kind of putting it between the teeth, and yeah, it just meant that when I made the next mask, I realized, oh, I actually should just start using wire. So that was the next mask. But in my head, I think there were still embroideries, even though they clearly aren't, but it was still like I was just moving a thread around, but this time in 3 dimensions, and I was kind of lacing them with pearls and beads and things like that. So they were still kind of textile to me in some way. I ended up doing a lot of these wire pieces, which are really fun to make. And then I kind of went back and I started combining the wire with the embroidery. So I was now just using the wire more to lift the embroidery off the face and make the embroidery more sculptural. And I think I was also wanting it not just to be too traditional, so I was often embroidering plastic and latex and other weird materials, and often using this thread which reacts under ultraviolet light, which we were kind of using live on stage. So a mask, we could put an ultraviolet light on in certain songs, and the whole mask would suddenly change character and start glowing. So that kind of technique of using wire and then kind of attaching the embroidery to it, this mask is probably where I started sliding more into metalwork. Björk had been wearing and kind of collecting a lot of gold kind of floral jewelry at the time, so it felt like something that would match. And yeah, I started using kind of more big polished panels instead of embroidery. So at this point, it's nowhere near embroidery, but in my head it kind of still was. And then I started making a lot of metalwork pieces for the tour that was kind of starting at that time. Yeah, mostly all these kind of first ones that were made from sheet brass. That was kind of one of the first ones I made for that tour. Yeah, and this is probably the thing I find most interesting about it, is just the technique that I developed for making these. For some reason in my head, they had to always just be cut from one piece of metal, and I kind of would define, it always had to be 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters square, and whatever mask I was wanting to make, I had to fit it into those dimensions, and it all had to fold out from itself. So there was never any joining or soldering or riveting two pieces together. It felt like cheating to me for some reason. I still don't totally understand. But I think maybe it's because I wanted them to feel like organic objects that had just grown on their own. And as soon as you start joining pieces together, it felt too man-made. So they ended up getting quite complex. Like that was, the one on the left was quite difficult to figure out how to fold it all out from one piece. But it also meant there was very little waste because, yeah, if I go back, you can see often almost every inch of the metal was kind of taken up. So this piece, for example, in the background, it ends up like this once it's all been bent and cut out. So you can't kind of tell it's made from one piece. I included these here. These are more recent masks. These I made last month. But just to talk about, even in the wire work, I still have that same feeling. They're always just made from one piece of wire. So it's about 8 meters long, I think, just moved back and forward on itself symmetrically. It always feels like cheating to cut it and join it together. This was a really fun commission that came in later on from Tilda Swinton. She was getting a Lifetime Achievement Award in Venice. And this was really exciting for me to make because technically it was kind of the opposite of most of the masks I'd made for Björk up until that point. Because the ones for Björk, she always had to have her mouth clear so she could sing, and they had to be kind of stapled into her hair so they wouldn't fall off during a concert. But Tilda really wanted a mask that she could take on and off really easily and that would cover her mouth. So it was really fun for me playing with this kind of different real estate on the face for a change. I made 2 because she was there for two days. And these are the ones that are on display currently in Hafnarfjörður as part of DesignMarch. These 4 were kind of later on in the metalwork stuff, and I'd started working with silver on those 2. And I think it was during COVID, I started for the first time just to look back on all the masks I'd made up until that point. I think there were about 80 of them, which surprised me. But I realized I could group them into these almost like family trees, these different little groups. So there was this kind of, I called it the ghost orchid shape, and these kind of funny jellyfish ones, and more like a kind of petal shape, and then the insecty ones. So these metalwork ones, I was using them as a way to kind of make the final boss of each of these families, and kind of imagining if they were evolving, and this was kind of the ultimate form for each of those families. This was another commission that came in from Iris van Herpen. It was for her couture collection, and I included these here because they actually exemplify quite well where most of my references or inspirations come from. So this one, the copper piece, I was obsessed at the time with baleen, the kind of filtration teeth of whales. So I was kind of filling my laptop with pictures of those and ended up making these glasses that were inspired by that. The one in the middle was inspired by the tunglurt. This is actually in my garden. It's my favorite plant in Iceland. And the one on the right was inspired by the zygomatic bone, which is essentially the cheekbone. So these three actually are a good example, because I think usually my references are usually about something internal from the animal kingdom or from human anatomy that I'm trying to bring out. And there's also often a lot of plants somehow end up in there too. So these three kind of exemplified all that. Around this time, I started learning how to make filters. I think because I'd only been making one of each mask, people were often asking me to borrow them or to wear them, and this was kind of my way of giving them to people for free to try on and wear. Yeah, and I think it was also maybe a way for me to, similarly with the metalwork pieces I talked about before, it was also kind of these fragile wirework pieces. I was trying to make an ideal version of them in the kind of digital world, that they wouldn't get squashed and they could just be preserved there. So I was usually going back through most of the fragile masks and kind of making digital versions of them just to kind of preserve them somehow. This is just making it in Blender, which is the software I use. Yeah, this stingray skeleton mask, I recommend Googling what stingray skeletons look like. They're amazing. But this was a kind of funny moment because it was the first mask, I think, that I started designing it in 3D software for a filter, and then thought, I might try and make this physically. And then once I'd made one version physically, I went back to the digital software and updated the filter. And then it kind of was the start of something which is happening a lot more now in my work, where the digital and the physical are almost in a little kind of war with each other in a nice way. They kind of, I figure out some shape in the digital world, then I try and replicate it physically, and vice versa, and it kind of goes back and forward quite often, and I discover different things and then introduce them into each other. And just the whole kind of idea of the physical and the digital I find really interesting. That's the digital one, and that's the real one. And as I was making new versions of masks, I would start to kind of update the filters too, so people could always be trying on kind of the latest mask that I made. Then I started a lot of 3D printing, just because I got really into sculpting stuff in 3D software. This was made for Björk to wear at Coachella, and we were on tour, so I worked with an amazing team in Japan who 3D printed it for me. And they got this amazing finish on it, like glass. And actually, with the 3D printing too, it was always a similar concept. They were always just, it had the same feeling of being just one piece. Like, for example, this edge is actually a full spiral. You could follow the whole thing around the whole mask. So it was almost like taking a sheet of metal and just twisting it many, many times. But I think what I was most excited about with those is just more the materiality. I was always just sending references of fish bones and organic things I wanted the 3D print to look like. So it was really exciting because it was stuff I couldn't do with metal or embroidery necessarily. This is a I really like this kind of sheeny finish as well on these masks. This was inspired by the Icelandic fox and the Hrossagauka again. This is my favorite. And I thought I would end just by quickly talking about this pair of shoes that I made. I'd always wanted to make a pair of shoes, really practical, gym shoes, basically. Yeah, it was for the last album, and I think I really wanted to make something that was just almost like archaeological. They were actually inspired by these amazing 15th century patterns from Ireland, and I included that there because actually I don't think necessarily it's so visible in my work, but most of my references or inspiration comes from archaeology, which is kind of what my background was in. So I very rarely actually visit art galleries. I mostly go to museums and look at old objects. But I started designing a pair based on these, and they ended up somehow being like kind of a whalebone or a tooth or something. And I wanted them just to be all natural, so they were made from Icelandic birch, which was kind of a nod to Björk's name. And I dyed them with charcoal and polished them with beeswax, and I just didn't want to use anything synthetic on them. And I was also really obsessed with the stuff that Carbfix were doing, not actually far from my cabin where I live. So they very generously gave me one of their core samples of the basalt that's capturing carbon from the atmosphere. And I asked an Icelandic sculptor, Mattias Runar, to sculpt these little eggs that went in the back of the shoe. So they were made from stone, Icelandic birch, and solid silver. And Björk did actually wear them for this photo, so they were functional. And yeah, this was actually kind of a good slide to end on for me, because you can see Björk's wearing a ring here, and that was actually a prototype, which kind of leads into what I'm doing next. I'm starting to design and make some jewelry this year. I kind of developed this prototype into something else. I don't have any photos of it, unfortunately, yet, but I thought this photo brings us up into the present. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. A couple of quick questions, perhaps. But you do realize that the only thing between now and the power break is us.
Yeah.
So we'll just. So I'm just going to ask maybe a couple of questions. Yeah. But one of the things that I was thinking about while you were speaking is, like, do you feel like your work seems very, intuitive, and obviously you are so creative, and do you really feel that the need to nurture your creativity specifically, or to protect it? Is this why you have the cabin, or?
Yeah, I think it's just naturally how I prefer to work. I think I like being isolated and just working in my own little bubble in a way. Yeah. I obviously love collaboration, but it's different when I'm making my own little objects. I couldn't do it with anyone watching almost. I just like being kind of hidden in a little shed at the bottom of the garden to do that. Yeah,
so that's just how you want it to be.
Yeah, it feels very natural that way.
Yeah. Do you have a dream project?
I have lots of projects that are kind of burning a hole in my laptop, but I'm kind of slowly getting around to them. I think actually the jewelry thing is something I really have been thinking about for a long time, and I'm working with a bronze foundry in my hometown where I grew up in England, so it feels very kind of natural progression that I'm doing it very small scale. I'm only making kind of 20 pieces to begin with. So it feels very kind of manageable and nice, but definitely that was kind of a dream of mine for a long time.
Oh, that's great. And that is actually quite significant or like exemplary for your work, you know, that you do it on small scale. You resist sort of going into like, you know, with Nike and everyone.
Yeah, I think that's something I've always resisted, the kind of natural temptation or expectation to kind of always scale up. I think when I was doing the embroideries and also with the masks, people are often like, oh, you could make them here and you could sell them here and you could do this and you could do this. And it's just always felt like a no from me, which is probably really stupid in a lot of ways. It's not totally noble, it's also just because I have a really bad business head, but it's also because I just want to make them in a nice way and make them have meaning and not dilute what I've got, basically.
Okay, and one last question, just because we're in Iceland.
Yeah.
Why on earth did you choose to live in Iceland?
I mean, have you been to the swimming pool? It's actually the swimming pool. I go like every day. I can't live without it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, James, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And give this a warm applause.
Thank you.
Thanks. And the power break. Outside, something awaits you, like in a circus. We're back in...
Ég heiti Jóhanna Harpa Árnadóttir og vinn með sjálfbærnimálefni í teymi samskipta og sjálfbærni. Nú, þegar að koma að þeim tímamótum að það átti að taka í notkun nýjan einkennisfatnað, þá var ljóst að þetta var töluvert magn af eldri fatnaði sem að yrði lagður til hliðar. Við viljum koma að þeim fatnaði í heppilega endurnýtingu og við vissum af þeim í fléttu.
Ég heiti Birta. Og ég heiti Hrefna og við rekum saman stúdíó Fléttu. Icelandic hafði samband við okkur af því að þau eru að skipta út einkennisfatnaðum sínum. Og þetta eru náttúrulega margir mismunandi búningar, þetta eru hattar og bindi, slæður, jakkar.
Það er bæði gaman og mikil áskorun að vinna með svona fínt hráefni, þá svona vill maður gera því góð skil.
Fyrir Icelandic þá er það mjög dýrmætt að eiga í samstarfi eins og þessu og þar sem að báðir aðilar njóta góðs af.
Alltaf þegar við vinnum svona verkefni þá vinnum við út frá hráefninu. Reynum bara að hugsa hvað vill þetta verða og það gerum við til þess að reyna að fullnýta það sem við erum með í höndunum hverju sinni. Til dæmis eins og með þessa hatta, þeir eru úr ull þannig að það er hægt að móta þá aftur. Við tókum þá og mótuðum í svona veski.
Já.
Í rauninni er hægt að spretta upp rennilásnum og móta þetta aftur í hatt sem okkur finnst mjög skemmtilegt. Þetta er svona leikur þar sem við erum að reyna að fullnýta það sem við erum í höndunum. Einhvern veginn gaf taskan okkur svona frelsi til þess að leika okkur með öll elementin úr einkennisfatnaðinum.
Allir þessi fatnaður sem búin að ferðast út all og núna ætlum við bara að leyfa honum að halda áfram í ferðalagi í nýjum búning.
Þetta er ánægjulegt að sjá afraksturinn af þessu verkefni þar sem að fatnaðurinn fær að halda ferðalaginu áfram og fara einn hring enn.
Hvernig býr maður til vöru úr þreyttum ávöxtum og grænmeti? Við hjá Krónunni erum alltaf að leita leiða til að lágmarka sóun, koma bæði matvælum og öðrum efnivið aftur inn í hringrásarhagkerfið. Við höfum lengi lagt áherslu á að sporna gegn matarsóun með ýmsum verkefnum, til dæmis síðasta séns, en okkur langaði að taka þetta skrefinu lengra og heyrðum því þeim í meltu.
Við erum melta og við breytum úrgangi í afurð með því að gerja hann og fyrir hönnunarmars í ár það fengum við þreytta ávexti og grænmeti úr Krónunni og gerjuðum svo úr varð vökvi fyrir plönturnar.
So this is the product that we get from it. When we take all of the food waste and ferment it, the microbes that do the fermentation break down all the food waste. There's the solid portion which can be used in your garden, buried in, makes your soil very healthy. But the liquid version also has a lot of the healthy microbes that your plants really want and that the soil also needs, that the microbes can make nutrients available to your plants.
Okkar innkoma var fyrst og fremst að sameina þessi markmið Krónunnar og meltu og koma því vel til skila í vörunni sjálfri. Og þar vorum við náttúrulega fyrst og fremst með leikgleðina og fræðslu að leiðarljósi. Hér á Brandenburg þá hefst ferlið iðulega hjá okkur á góðri hugmyndvinnu og við byrjuðum á að skoða nafn fyrir vöruna og vorum fljót að finna að moldamin, það var svona nafnið sem að blómstraði mest hjá okkur. Enda mjög lýsandi fyrir vöruna sjálfa. Vítamín fyrir moldina.
Moldamin í raun afurð hins fullkomna samstarfs og hönnunarmars hinn fullkomni vettvangur til að frumsýna vöruna.
Ég heiti Jóhannsdóttir og textilhönnuður, betur þekkt sem Írurari. Þann 24. apríl munu ég og 66° norður sýna samstarfsverkefnið Smá flís á hönnunarmars. Smá flís byggir á afgangsflísefnivið úr framleiðslu 66 sem ég móta í nýjar flísbætur í anda fyrir verka Írurari. Bótunum tylli ég á ósöluhæfar 66° norðurpeysur sem saumastofa fyrirtækisins saumar niður. Útkoman sería af einstökum peysum sem allar hafa öðlast nýjan karakter, tilbúnar að lífga upp á hversdaginn.
Það sem að föt fyrir mér rauninni bara búningasaga. Þau rauninni þekkir, ártöl og tímabil í gegnum föt.
Mér finnst vera frelsi í fatahönnun, allavega eins og ég sé þetta, þá ég ekki bara að framleiða föt og selja föt, heldur sé þetta miklu meira sem list og sem tjáningu.
Þessi svona pæling að maður sé einhvern veginn fæðist í eitthvað hlutverk og þú eigir bara að leika það, restin af henni gammaldags. Af hverju ekki prófa mismunandi hlutverk og mismunandi búninga sem fylgja þeim hlutverkum?
Að vinna með ullina og vinna með þessi strúktúruðu form sem ég var að gera, þú sé svona svolítið kaotískt af því þetta svo miklu andstæður sem að ætti náttúrulega að stangast á en það einhvern veginn unnu samt saman. Þannig að þetta svona svolítið að taka mismunandi elements og setja það saman.
Já, klálega að framleiða flík getur verið algjört drulla og kaos, sko. Þú veist, þegar þú ert að gera svona hlæðilega flík, þú veist, 2 centimetrar getur skemmt allt, skilur við. Þannig að þetta þarf að vera mjög akkúrat.
Óreiðan ótrúlega mikilvæg líka bara til að halda áfram. Þarft einhvern veginn að leyfa óreiðan að eiga sér stað til að ná jafnvægi.
Síðan þegar þú ert allt inni búin með verkefnið, þá eitthvað svona, ok, þetta make sense.
Fólk sem listrænt, það með öðruvísi hugmyndir það hvernig við viljum halda áfram inn í framtíðina. Við getum ekki sagt að tískuiðnaðurinn mest svona sustainable iðnaðurinn. Ég trúi því að það breytingar að gerast og þetta akkúrat okkar kynslóð sem að fara að gera það.
Ég heiti Jóhanna Harpa Arnardóttir og vinn með sjálfbærnimálefni í teymi samskipta og sjálfbærni. Nú, þegar að koma að þeim tímamótum að það átti að taka í notkun nýjan einkennisfatnað, þá var ljóst að þetta var töluvert magn af eldri fatnaði sem að yrði lagður til hliðar. Við viljum koma þeim fatnaði í heppilega endurnýtingu og við vissum af þeim í fléttu.
Ég heiti Birta.
Og ég heiti Hrefna og við rekum saman stúdíó Fléttu.
Icelandic hafði samband við okkur af því að þau eru að skipta út einkennisfatnaðum sínu. Og þetta eru náttúrulega margir mismunandi búningar, þetta eru hattar og bindi, slæður, jakkar.
Það er bæði gaman og mikil áskorun að vinna með svona fínt hráefni, þá svona vill maður gera því góð skil.
Fyrir Icelandic þá er það mjög dýrmætt að eiga í samstarfi eins og þessu og þar sem að báðir aðilar njóta góðs af.
Alltaf þegar við vinnum svona verkefni þá vinnum við út frá hráefninu. Reynum bara að hugsa hvað vill þetta verða og það gerum við til þess að reyna að fullnýta það sem við erum með í höndunum hverju sinni. Til dæmis eins og með þessa hatta, þeir eru úr ull þannig að það er hægt að móta þá aftur. Við tókum þá og mótuðum í svona veski.
Já.
Í rauninni er hægt að spretta upp rennilásnum og móta þetta aftur í hatt sem okkur finnst mjög skemmtilegt. Þetta er svona leikur þar sem við erum að reyna að fullnýta það sem við erum í höndunum. Einhvern veginn gaf taskan okkur svona frelsi til þess að leika okkur með öll elementin úr einkennisfatnaðinum.
Allir þessi fatnaðir sem búin að ferðast út all og núna ætlum við bara að leyfa honum að halda áfram því ferðalagi í nýjum búning.
Þetta er ánægjulegt að sjá afraksturinn af þessu verkefni þar sem að fatnaðurinn fær að halda ferðalaginu áfram og fara einn hring enn.
Hvernig býr maður til vöru úr þreyttum ávöxtum og grænmeti? Við hjá Krónunni erum alltaf að leita leiða til að lágmarka sóun, koma bæði matvælum og öðrum efnivið aftur inn í hringrásarhagkerfið. Við höfum lengi lagt áherslu á að sporna gegn matarsóun með ýmsum verkefnum, til dæmis síðasta séns, en okkur langaði að taka þetta skrefinu lengra og heyrðum því þeim í meltu.
Við erum melta og við breytum úrgangi í afurð með því að gerja hann og fyrir hönnunarmars í ár það fengum við þreytta ávexti og grænmeti úr Krónunni og gerjuðum svo úr varð vökvi fyrir glöggumlegin.
So this is the product that we get from it. When we take all of the food waste and ferment it, the microbes that do the fermentation break down all the food waste. There's the solid portion which can be used in your garden, buried in, makes your soil there healthy. But the liquid version also has a lot of the healthy microbes that your plants really want and that the soil also needs, that the microbes can make nutrients available to your plants.
Okkar innkoma var fyrst og fremst að sameina þessi markmið Krónunnar og meltu og koma því vel til skila í vörunni sjálfri. Og þar vorum við náttúrulega fyrst og fremst með leikgleðina og fræðslu að leiðarljósi. Hér á Brandenburg þá hefst ferlið iðulega hjá okkur á góðri hugmyndvinnum og við byrjuðum á að skoða nafn fyrir vöruna og vorum fljót að finna að moldamin, það var svona nafnið sem að blómstraði mest hjá okkur. Enda mjög lýsandi fyrir vöruna sjálfa. Vítamín fyrir moldina.
Moldamin er í raun afurð hins fullkomna samstarfs og Hönnunarmars hinn fullkomni vettvangur til að frumsýna vöruna.
Ég heiti Jóhannsdóttir og er textilhönnuður, betur þekkt sem Írurari. Þann 24. apríl munu ég og 66 gráður norður sína samstarfsverkefnið Smá flís á Hönnunarmars. Smá flís byggir á afgangsflísefni við úr framleiðslu 66 sem ég móta í nýjar flísbætur í anda fyrir verka Írurari. Bótunum tylli ég á ósöluhæfar 66 gráður norðurpeysur sem saumastofa fyrirtækisins saumar niður. Útkoman er sería af einstökum peysum sem allar hafa öðlast nýjan karakter, tilbúnar að lífga upp á hversdaginn.
Það sem að föt eru fyrir mér er rauninni bara búningasaga. Þau rauninni þekkir, ártöl og tímabil í gegnum föt.
Mér finnst vera frelsi í fatahönnun, allavega eins og ég sé þetta, þá er ég ekki bara að framleiða föt og selja föt, heldur sé þetta miklu meira sem list og sem tjáningu.
Þessi svona pælinga að maður sé einhvern veginn fæðist í eitthvað hlutverk og þú eigir bara að leika það restina af henni er gammaldags. Af hverju ekki prófa mismunandi hlutverk og mismunandi búninga sem fylgja þeim hlutverkum?
Að vinna með ullina og vinna með þessi struktúruðu form sem ég var að gera, þú sé svona svolítið kaotískt af því þetta er svo miklu andstæður sem að ættu náttúrulega að stangast á en það er einhvern veginn unnu samt saman. Þannig að þetta er svona svolítið að taka mismunandi elements og setja það saman.
Já, klálega að framleiða flík getur verið algjört drulla og kaos, sko. Þú veist, þegar þú ert að gera svona hlæðilega flík, þú veist, 2 centimetrar getur skemmt allt, skilur við. Þannig að þetta þarf að vera mjög accurate.
Óreiðan er ótrúlega mikilvæg líka bara til að halda áfram. Þarft einhvern veginn að leyfa óreiðan að eiga sér stað til að ná jafnvægi.
Síðan þegar þú ert allt í einu búin með verkefnið, þá er eitthvað þess að, ok, þetta make sense.
Fólk sem er listrænt, það er með öðruvísi hugmyndir það hvernig við viljum halda áfram inn í framtíðina. Við getum ekki sagt að tískuiðnaðurinn er mest sem sustainable iðnaðurinn. Ég trúi því að það eru breytingar að gerast og þetta er akkurat okkar kynslóð sem er að fara að gera það.
All right, guys. We are almost finished, so the people outside, please come in. Come in, come in, come in. We're almost at the rúsinan í pylsuendunum, the raisin in the hot dog end, which is a good thing. So if you want to come in, people that want to hear the last lecture, so while we wait for the people, so have you planned on like what dance moves you're going to do tonight when you party? I was thinking of maybe giving you some ideas. So I always like to do like movements small. So if your movement is like huge, that you just take it down to like maybe 5%. So this move just becomes like, And you can just see like, I'm having so much fun on the inside. And I always like maybe hands, and I really love like go for it on the dance floor. Just do like a good dance so you won't fall if you're drunk. And then just go for like, and just really listen to the music. Because we have an issue with not following the rhythm. And just, if you, next time you're going to the gym, even the teachers are just doing something, and it's like, there is music to follow. There is a bass line, and then we move with the bass line. So are we coming in? Are we ready for the next session? The last session. We are losing the crowd. All right. Are you ready? We are going for the last act. Act number 4 starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
Act 4. Let's talk about humor and humility on designing for sensory responses and new learnings. Lani van Risvik, designer and co-founder of Atelier NL. Together with her creative partner, Nadine Sturck, Lani is mindful of the values of the local environment, which we sometimes shy away from. Atelier NL believes that design has the ability to connect local communities to the valuable resources that surround them. Their work explores the potential of local sourcing and production by focusing on the subtleties of the earth right under our feet.
Hello, thank you for having me here. It has been very inspiring already, listening to the previous talkers, where we have to enjoy life and follow our intuition in spaces where we feel connected and have a sense of belonging. And the passion I could see in the last speaker, with the beautiful craftsmanship. I'm Lani van Risvik from ATNL and work together with Nadine Sturck. We love clay. We love to stand with our feet in dirt. It all started in an internship in Peru in 2003. I want to take you on this journey to show where we are now. I was working there with ceramics, and we went to dig clay with a donkey in the early morning. And that was the moment where I felt connected with clay, because before I always went to the shop to buy my clay. And then that morning when we were walking to get to the clay and I had the clay in my hand, I felt like, wow, this is so beautiful. And then when I went back to the Netherlands, I felt this moment of pure joy when I was there. And I went back to the Netherlands and I started digging clay in the Netherlands to find my own clay. And I started to become an expert of clay. I also started to understand that Holland is very beautiful and it has different landscapes, which I didn't see before, but I really had to get into the dirt to understand Holland and understanding clay. With my graduation, actually a very beautiful outcome was that we made ceramics and beautiful colors were revealed. At that time, I only thought it was because of the identity of place, but I didn't know what I had in my hands, because it's not only about identity of place, but it's also talking about geology, about history, about archaeology. After the graduation, we were invited in Noordoostpolder, which is an area in the Netherlands, which is a reclaimed sea, so it's made land out of it. And you could think like, why are you going to a small place? It would be nice to explore the whole world and find new clays, but it was actually beautiful to go to that area and to really deepen and understand what we were doing. So this also became the methodology of our work. First we do field work, so we go into the field, we explore, we want to understand the surrounding, we talk with the people who live there. In this case it's the farmers who having their crops there and harvest. So we went to talk with the farmers. I have the first time in my life I saw a cow born. We drank coffee, but we also helped them on the land. We took a photographer with us to make a photo of those farmers, because for us collecting clay, which we were doing, when you have a bucket of clay, it's anonymous, but when you have the picture of the farmer, it becomes it's going to speak. So you can see it's all beautiful pictures of farmers who work their land. We learned a lot from the farmers. We learned that there's a moment of seeding, of growing and developing and harvesting. But sometimes your harvest is ruined because economics are bad or it's bad weather. This is something you can't control. And this is something I learned a lot from, because we are in moments of life where we have to have always a sort of like instant satisfaction. So, but also to understand that there are failures because it's raining, and those farmers have to adapt to that. So for us, it became also a methodology in our work that we use the time to not go up front, but also to understand that sometimes we just have to make failures in order to harvest later. And if the harvest is ruined, that we can also think of new paths and new ways. So then we collected all the clay, and these are buckets. When you would throw them all in a pile, it would be just dirt. But when you say, this is from Farmer Ben and this is from Farmer Carla, it all of a sudden becomes a material. So it gets belonging from that farmer. And in our mythology, where we first do field work, the next step is monk work. So we really dive into the material, and we repetitively, meditatively turn the clay into a huge clay wall, which took us half a year to make it. It's the Noordoostpolder turned into clay. It's also a visual representation of the data. So you can see on the left side, there is sandy clay. In the middle, it's more rough clay. You can also see through the colors. So this is also giving information of geology. Understanding the material is very important for us. And while we're actually diving into material, smelling it, tasting it, working with it, we create our ideas. So we're not sitting behind a drawing table, we are doing. And we wanted to make ceramic sets, which was really derived from the land. So the potato bowl, which was coming from the potatoes. And as you can see, there's only 6 shapes, but by adding sprout and handles, it becomes a coffee pot or a bulb vase, or, for example, a milk jug. So strawberry plate. So we were there for 2 years. We only wanted to go 6 weeks to the Noordoostpolder to do this research, but we really fell in love. So we ended up staying there for 2 years working with the farmers. We were just graduated, so people were asking us, what are you doing there? You're just drinking coffee and working with the farmers. When is your next design coming up? And of course we got nervous, because there was always this pressure of you have to present something. But we really are happy that we took the time and that we learned from them that you have to work thoroughly. And the moment when we started exhibiting our work, it went super fast. So actually time ran and came back to us. So within half a year, we were presented in London and New York, this installation of work and the farmers. But one thing which is very important in our work is actually to thank the people you work with. So while doing these exhibitions, we were like, we need to thank the farmers. They are so essential for us, for our work. So we organized a meal on the land, and everything was actually brought by the earth. So the hay bales we could sit on, and then the farmers brought very nice food from their land, and we brought the plates. And that sunny day, a farmer came to me and he said, first when you came to my field, I thought, oh girls, no, you cannot make ceramics out of this. I'm harvesting potatoes here. But then he said, you really proved me that you can make ceramics out of it. And he said, next time when my harvest is ruined, I will harvest ceramics. And that was really nice to hear, because someone who's looking to his field every day like this can then have a different perspective. And I think this is something we as creative people can do, give another perspective of something which we are looking at like this. So then we also made the clay in production with the oldest ceramics factory in the Netherlands, Royal Tegela. He asked us, what is your dream? And we said to work with the local material. For them it was a really investment, because you have to understand, like one clay, when you have to clean it, you have to make it, you have to clean the whole machine. So it cannot be mass production. So it was very nice that they wanted to work with us to make the ceramics. Even each ceramics has its own character, own shrinkage, own glazier. So it takes almost a year for one glazier for ceramics. Unfortunately, it only took like 3 years that it was in production, but it was it went worldwide. So that was very nice for us, that people started to eat from our ceramics. But unfortunately, Royal Tegela had to stop because they couldn't survive with small projects. So they're working into architecture now. So we had to produce ourselves, and this is what we're doing at the moment. And we're also working together with chefs with food, which they made. And this is one of the examples where we're also eating from our plates, but also outside in the fields. In our work we do exhibitions, and we actually engage people from young and old, and from designers to neighbors. And this is our church, and I'm going to tell a small story about our church. It's our atelier, which we got as creative people just to make it a nice place. But what happens to a lot of creative people when they get spaces to make them bloom again, which was in Eindhoven, there was a lot of creative people who got spaces, but then when the developers came, we had to go out, and then yeah, that was it. So this was the same with our church. So we got it, we had to make it alive again, and to connect neighborhoods, and we did that, but not only by art, but also by just playing football inside, or roller skating. And then we had to leave because developers would came and make houses into it. But we asked then the neighbors, do you want us to leave? And they were like, no, we want you to stay. So then we went to the bank, and we actually told the bank, we are going to buy a church. So he was saying, okay, can you show me your papers? So we brought our portfolio with our work, which we have been doing with our neighbors and with people in the design world. And he was looking at it, and he was saying, okay, I'm only interested in your financial figures. How do you live? And I was like, how do I live? I'm super happy, and I'm doing a lot of field work, and I'm outside. And he was like, okay, sorry, but you cannot buy a church. So we were quite upset by this. And we're like, that day it was raining, and we literally standing in the mud when we went outside, and we're like, how do we live? Okay, we show him how we live. We collected a lot of earth, and we are going to make our own money. So we asked the neighbors, like, can you help us, not throwing tomatoes, but please help us with making tiles. And this became very inspirational because people really wanted us to help. And it was a Charlie and Chocolate factory. In like 3 weeks, we made 3,000 tiles. And luckily, it was Dutch Design Week then, 2015, because we had like 5 weeks to prove that we could buy the church. And we sold each tile for €35, and it was all clay connected to a place. And people were buying it. So they really wanted us to stay, and it became like a project where all people were involved, and at the end we raised €80,000, which is crazy, like in 1 week, by selling tiles. But people who wrote their name on the wall, and they felt a kind of ownership also of this church. Literally, they have now a piece of our church. And we went back to the bank with our €80,000, and we got a mortgage. And I think this is a very nice example of when you have a dream, that you can do it. It's not only about money, but it's also about people, about the community you build. And this can be more powerful, the social connection. This is also, I think, how we could together make change. Because if we all collect, we can go for things differently. We do a lot of projects with students. We like to take people into the field and do workshops with people to understand where the clay comes from, how does it feel, how you can work with it. So preparing it and learning how to make ceramics out of it. At the moment, and we call it actually clay digging. It's like a new craftsmanship. It's called the clay diggers. The deeper you dig, the more worlds are actually revealed. So you don't need to go far. It can already happen within a circle around you. At the moment, we're doing starting a very nice project. It's important for us through our work to raise an awareness of issues which we also confront when doing this work. And one of the projects we're working on now is there is a lot of clay coming free in the Netherlands because we have to widen the rivers and build dikes because Holland will flood because of climate change and also heavy rainfall. And some of the parts in the Netherlands are already facing this, but people don't know. And they ask us to raise awareness about it, and there's a lot of clay coming free, so we're going to make ceramics, which will be a communicative piece for people, but also we will work with the people in the area with the clay, and through our work tell about the circumstances we are living in. And now that brings me to our next journey, because we're also in love with sand, and actually it's kind of the same journey where we're by doing learning. So when we were working on clay, we realized we also want to make our own glass, because sand is made out of glass. And glass is made out of sand. And but the glass industry was saying, well, that's not so interesting for us because we think in millions. So then we were like, okay, then we're going to find our own sand, and we followed the routes of the Romans because we thought they would be smart to follow the routes of the most resources. This was a beautiful journey where we visited dunes and quarries and beautiful places, and there are many types of sand. There are volcanic sands, as you know, pink sands, limestone sands, and we learned a lot about the world, but we also learned how small we are, where you were talking about as well, and standing here, like knowing that this is like millions of time. So we started to make our own recipes for making glass from sand, and we just started cooking and made over 1,000, more than 1,000, 10,000, I think, samples. We're doing this for 10 years, and here you can see the samples, and also that it sometimes makes a foam, and then you don't have the right recipe. Now we can make, like, for any sand you send to us, we can make glass. For us, it's also important to map where does it come from. These are little boxes, so it's a difference when it comes from a forest or from a beach. We are telling about geology, about the size of the grain, etc. And here you can see. And then, of course, we wanted to make our own glass, which, again, people were saying that it wasn't possible to get the quality we have today. So, but we liked imperfect. So we built our own oven to make it happen, and in 2016 we managed to make our own glass from wild sand. So this is the first one made out of glass from a zandmotor place in the Netherlands coastal protection, where we also told a story through the glass. And here, same, this one holds a lot of iron, and that's why it's darker glass. And here you can see different colors of glass, which are very beautiful, and all from wild sand. Here you can see the ceramics and the glass together on one table. And the minerals, like the more iron it consists, the more dark it becomes the glass, and the greener the glass, and more red the clay. We also use our live pieces of glass to make a reverse painted glass. And here you can see an example of a window we made. While working with this, we of course also want to involve the people. So we started to do a project where we ask people to send us sand and tell us their story, where they found this sand. And for some people it was holiday sand. And for other people, they started realizing, like, what am I doing? Can I actually send this sand to you? And they also started to realize that where they were walking is actually very beautiful, but they were just walking over it. But then when they had to fill up this bottle, it was a moment of celebration, of pure joy, that you're there with your loved ones in this beautiful space and a place. And then, of course, the choice, like, should I send it or not? And this is also something we realized during the project. Because what are we doing? We're asking people for sand, but we also learned that there's a sand scarcity. Because we met Michael Welland, and Michael Welland is a geologist, and he has a passion for sand, and he wrote many books on sand. And he learned us that there is a scarcity of sand. So I want to show you a small movie of that. And first I want to say this is all the people who participating in our project. So I'm going to the movie.
Remove from our lives everything that depends on sand, and the world would look very different. We would have no glass, no computer chips, we would have no buildings. We're just not aware of how important sand is to our daily lives.
Sand is a massively underestimated resource. You can't build a house or a building without sand, and this sand has to come from somewhere.
Unfortunately, we can't use the desert sand of the Sahara or any other desert for construction purposes.
You hear people talk about the end of oil, but nobody's talking about the end of sand.
Per noi la sabbia è maggiore dell'oro.
The demand for that resource is such that the illegal excavation and commerce in sand is a worldwide problem.
Singapore is being accused of expanding its coastline with illegally dredged sand from neighbouring states. Of expanding its coastline with illegal
giant accused of illegally taking.
Illegal beach sand mining is becoming an international challenge.
What we see is this huge trade around the world of sand moving from one area to another, and it's often ripped up from beaches.
It's big. This is big business.
Si on fait l'extraction sauvage, que ce soit dans les rivières, sur les plages ou au large, on va aboutir inexorablement à une disparition des plages. Or, les plages reculent. Et ça, c'est une tendance qui est globale.
Quite significant environmental damage and degradation. Some of the islands off the coast of Indonesia have literally vanished.
We lost our environment. We lost our livelihood. We lost everything.
When you are dredging sand, then whatever living communities are there will just be eliminated.
In our consciousness as a picture postcard of a beach, the idea that it might not be there anymore, I don't think is something that people would think about.
Yeah, so for me, when watching this and also the whole movie, it was quite shocking because when I go to a beach, I didn't imagine what was going on in the big world. So what we also learned from Michael Welland is he was saying, actually we live in a world of abundance, but it's the way we use our resources which make it scarce, and we have a choice. I think we have a choice to be in balance or to use it all, and I think that's why this theme of the circus and of this festival is very beautiful. The acrobat who walks on the line, I think it's not like the abundance and the scarcity, it's the yes or no, and this is the thin line we're all the time working on. So I'm very happy to be here today. We also did a symposium with Michael Welland on the abundance and scarcity of sand in 2017, and we prepared very well together, so we learned a lot from him. Unfortunately, he died 1 week before, but we got a beautiful message left. It's on our site, which is spoken from him. And he actually didn't tell us that he was really sick, but he really wanted to do this last project with us. And he really liked the collaboration, because what he was telling is like, in my work, I only read geologists, only people who are interested in sand. But working with you, you can read many other peoples who can have a dialogue on sand. So please spread the word about the sand, which I'm also doing today. So he also said, please continue your project, sending sand to you. Because he said, like, of course, you can think like, we shouldn't take something from a beach. And that's totally true, because actually it should be forbidden to take any resources. But on the other hand, while doing this project, you give people awareness and also thinking of what is the big industry doing. But be very critical about your work. And so this is an exhibition where we're showing also the glass samples which we made from the sand. So people, when they visit the exhibition, they can find their story, but also their glass. And we have over 800 stories from all the world. So it's like the stories which are told from everything which is happening in the world. From someone who is in abundance and scarcity. So this is a story about Dubai, taking sand to build their concrete buildings. The pollution in South Korea, which also came by today. Then also the climate, the drought in South Africa. There was a water crisis in 2018. And also, of course, the ice which is melting. These are all stories sent by people to us. talking about the society. So this is the category new and old and ancient and modern. So from a ruin which people are now visiting as tourists, from an old fisherman place where now a lot of sailors, and then the big and small and the fast and slow. So the big mountains, which are also through tourism slowly being affected. And then also the slowness. I have been in the Amazon for like 3 months in 2010, and there was no internet, no connection, so the only thing I was navigating on was the speed of how I walked and the flow of the water and the reaction from someone else. So it really brought me back to myself, which was also very confronted because I was so used to cross the world in 1 minute. So it also had a lot of, it gave me also anxiety actually, but it was very beautiful in the end. Then of course, are we a tourist or are we an intruder of an area when we go on holiday? So this is this category. And also the motel which is left, this is also a story from someone through the war in Bosnia. And also the last category, mind, matter, body and soul, were stories which were sent about people who lost someone, but also someone who married, or someone who was looking for adoption parents, which they couldn't find, or someone who was happy. So it's all the time in the contrast in the categories. So this project we also translated into an activity where people really could feel the stories. So we made a whole parcours where people could walk through, and we had to drag the sand and then reading the stories and getting into a role of a project developer or an archaeologist or a farmer or a tree or a rabbit to understand what's going on in the world and making decisions. So people were doing that. They were sifting sand, they were dragging sand. It was a very hot week, so people also got very tired. And by reading the stories, for example, of the sand which was stolen in Singapore to put, in Indonesia to put on the beach of Singapore, and other stories about climate change, they came to us at the end of the parcours and they were like, wow, I really love the project, but I'm also very sad. I didn't know what was going on in the world, and through dragging the sand and I really, the heaviness of this, I really felt it. And this is something super nice, and this is something we really want to continue with, not only making exhibition work, but also to really take people with us to really understand what is all happening. And this is kind of the same journey we are doing while doing this work. This is the last project I want to tell about. It's a project we have been doing in South Africa. And the balloon? No. It's almost done. And I have 30 minutes, it's 16. And so what we are doing, we are making a glass from the mine sand, the waste of the mines. And I think if you think about South Africa, where some people got really rich because the gold was found, other people got now people are living in pollution. You all know what happened in South Africa with the apartheid and the slavery. And so it's many people are living in circumstances still now, and the mines are closed but the mess is still there. So you can see the pollution in the land. This was water, so this is totally polluted, abandoned areas. So, and this is the last project we're doing. It's a small...
I'm in love with sand. We research over 700 sands in the world to see if we can make glass from that. But we are actually examining if it's also possible to make glass from what they say polluted sand when there's iron inside or other minerals. Could we turn the waste of mine, the waste sand, into glass? And my dream would be it would not be toxic anymore, and that we can set up, for example, local glass workplace where people can work, so that the areas which are around these mine dumps could make glass.
Based on skills transfer, for instance, with glass, if you transfer skill of manufacturing a glass from sand, it's something that an average individual can understand and be able to implement, you know.
Yes.
So it's a possible dream, looking at all angles, even the angle of where South Africa is at the moment with unemployment, youth unemployment, not just unemployment, you know. And also looking at environmental factors, the fact that how sustainable is creating glass from pure white sand, you know. And you need to find sustainable ways of doing that. And the most sustainable way at this point would be utilizing waste to create or produce that glass.
So actually, to see a world in a grain of sand is very beautiful. If we think that we are actually like grains of sand, we all traveled through rivers and sea, dunes and quarries, and then we come together on the beach like grain of sand, or how we come together here. And if we think like we are all unique, we have our own qualities, and how can we use them, and how can we work together? And together we can make beautiful colors. Thank you.
Harry Parr, architect, inventor, executive producer, and co-founder of Bompus and Parr. Often referred to as magicians or the real-life Willy Wonkas of London, Bompus and Parr has evolved into a studio recognized as the leading expert in multisensory experience design. The collaboration started with Harry Parr and Sam Bompus becoming experts in jelly making. The studio now delivers emotionally captivating experiences across various industries, and they call themselves architects of taste, feeding minds and stomachs.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure and an honour to be here in such a magical country, and also to follow on from some truly inspiring talks that we've had today. So what I want to talk about is bread and circuses. And so talking about circus made me think of a quote from Juvenal. Juvenal was a Roman poet, and he said, "Give them bread and circuses, and they will never revolt." So we're talking about entertainment, and for the last 17 years, Bompus and Parr, which is a creative studio based in London that I co-founded, has been creating experiences to entertain. But what I want to talk about is how I think just being entertained is no longer enough. So a quick history of Bompus and Parr. Started as jellymongers, making jelly in the shape of buildings. I was an architect. I am an architect, but at the time I was training to be an architect, and I got distracted and started using 3D printing, which at the time was quite novel, and started making these molds in the shape of buildings. So we started eating buildings, and that led to a commission to write a book about jelly. Suddenly we were jelly experts. one thing led to another. The publisher said, oh, we like your book about jelly. Isn't jelly kind of like cocktails? So we got into booze. We wrote a book about booze. And this is a project called Alcoholic Architecture, where you could absorb the booze through your lungs and eyeballs, so you could literally breathe it in. And booze leads to this, and this is Museum of Sex in New York. This is where we started looking more at experience design as a whole, and cultural themes as well. This is ice cream, Mary Antoinette's breast. Sitting on cakes is popular in certain sectors of society. Then we get to lava, and I don't need to tell you about lava. And actually this wonderful furnace there is the same as the one you have down the road at the lava show. And this is a project we did with Dr. Robert Thiemann from Syracuse University in upstate New York. And we were interested in cooking on the lava. He was interested in making the lava. We later asked him to work with us on a project in Saudi Arabia. He said, it's going to be a large sum of money to take my equipment out to the desert so you can do your funny lava cooking thing. By which point we'd already had the commission, so we went on to Alibaba and bought our own furnace, and it seemed to work. And as a business, we've also been involved in spectacle. This is where flavor and spectacle combined. We think it was the world's largest flavor experience, 250,000 people. This is London New Year's Eve 2013. You saw a red firework in the sky, and you would taste strawberries, and so on. So multisensory engagement. This, I think, perhaps is one of the world's largest jellies. It's a ship, SS Great Britain in Bristol, which is surrounded by a lime green jelly. Other sorts of spectacle. This is the reopening of the Olympic Park in London, dyeing it green with fluorescein. But, I think as a business, we were struggling a bit with spectacle. These might look quite spectacular, but I think the reaction was maybe not quite what we anticipated. We've also been doing lots of speculating recently as well. So twice a year we bring out reports. One's about the future of food and one's about the future of public leisure. We like to say that we don't really report on the future, but we make the future. And the core of the business now is location-based experiences. So immersive attractions, often with a cultural bent to them. And this is tasting rooms at Guinness Storehouse. So 1 million people a year are coming through this experience. And some of them are tasting Guinness for the first time here. So these are some clouds that I made, and each cloud tastes of one of the attributes of the flavors within the Guinness itself. Culture. This is a dinner in Alula in Saudi Arabia, looking at the incense roads. We started the British Museum of Food. This is what happens when you eat ice cream and have your brain scanned. And finally on this, we're now building our museum in London, which is the Museum of Shakespeare, and talk a bit about that and our approach to that in a moment. So, bread and circuses. Looked at how we feed and we entertain. So let's start with the bread. Now, feeding people is great. Bringing people together the food is magical. It can really bring people together and get that sense of cohesion and joy. And I think as a studio, when we look at this, we like to think about how all the senses work together, and it's this sort of multi-sensory, omnisensory, polysensory, everything at once, and how we can design with the senses. So I'm just going to run through some examples of the kind of tools we use and the things that we're interested in. So eyes, yeah, it said we taste with our eyes, and actually I was remembering earlier as a student, I used to eat baked beans on toast. It's very traditional, cheap English student food, not particularly tasty. But I'd read a cookery book at the same time and look at all the photos. And for me, that was as good. Like, I later learned there was a reason for that, and it's true. But you know, food is the most popular thing to photograph on Instagram still. We did an experiment many years ago with the neuroscientist Dr. Ben Seymour, and it was a very simple experiment. We had some yellow jellies, and we had some orange jellies, and we made some of the yellow jellies taste of lemon, and some of them tasted orange, and some of the orange jellies tasted lemon, some of the orange jellies tasted orange. And what happened was that 85% of people said that the jelly that they ate, so the coloured jellies, the flavour would correspond to the colour. So it just proves that we do eat with our eyes. It's a fundamental thing. And then smell. Smell is something we don't really understand that much. We're all familiar with ideas about smell and nostalgia and so on. We don't really know how it affects our ability to be in a space and to perceive. And I love this finger-sniffing example of some work done by the new scientists. So this was an experiment. There's a little video here. So scientists did an experiment, and they went into a room. They shook the subject's hands and said, okay, we're going to go out of the room now, and we're going to do some tests. And actually what they were looking at was whether people smelled their fingers after they shook hands with the researcher. And what this is showing is that they're not just scratching their nose. There's actually a sharp intake of breath when they're just pretending to have an itch, a little scratch. And why do we do this? Well, I think as designers we should think about smells and materials and so on. So there we go. And our tongues are all different too. Here's a tongue. So some years ago, I think it was for my 18th birthday, my parents took me to Restaurant Gordon Ramsay, 3 Michelin star restaurant in London. And my mother, being very embarrassing, said to the waiter, I would like some salt. Bring me some salt. I need to season the food properly. So the waiter, being very polite, said, of course, madam, of course, I'll get you the salt. Brings the silver grinder over. It's empty. Brings another one over. It's also empty. Now later, I heard Gordon Ramsay in an interview saying that when people ask for salt in his restaurant, he gives it to them, but he always makes sure that the grinder is empty. And in fact, this is absolute rubbish, because we all have different numbers of salt receptors on our tongues, so we all taste things differently. So we're allowed to season appropriately. Here's his Stellark, the slightly, hugely inspirational and slightly strange Australian artist, and ears are very important too. This is an organ that we built, a pipe organ, built it for a whiskey company, and the idea was to see whether sound could change your perception of taste. So we were in a hall like this, we had the organ, it was projected onto with visuals, there was an organist playing and someone doing a voiceover. Everyone in the audience had a glass of whiskey in their hand, and as they drank the whiskey, and because the whiskey was a blended whiskey, so it had lots of different single malts with different flavors in, by playing certain notes on the organ, certain melodies, certain frequencies, certain rhythms, the whiskey that people were drinking literally changed flavour. And then, as well as the senses, it's our environment that tells us what to taste. So this is a dish called chicken a la king. It was made by a researcher at Reading University, west of London, and he sent it out to different environments. He sent it out to prisons, to schools, to fancy restaurants. And when it was served in the prison, people said, "This dish was disgusting." The chicken was dry, it was tough, didn't finish it. And when it was served in the upscale, upmarket restaurant, they said it was tender and delicious and one of the best things they'd ever had to eat. So this is our world of senses that we try and work with when we design. And now I'm going to talk a bit about how we design an immersive experiences and the phases that we use. So we use a 6-phase approach, and these phases, and you'll see lots of organizations use similar phases. So Disney, for example, uses quite similar phases, but these are the ones that we came up with, which are anticipation, compression, reveal, risk, reward, and reflection. So there's a video here which we'll watch, and then you can see if you can spot those phases. So we'll run through that quickly. So the first one, anticipation. And this is where we set the scene for what's going to happen. Often it could be an invitation. It could be the way that we talk about it. In this case, it was the promise of mermen mixologists that people got excited about. Compression, so this is something that marks the transition into an experience and away from perhaps the world that you've been a moment before. So you, in this case, you get greeted by these hosts, and they send you down a secret corridor, which leads to a reveal moment. So this we use, say, it becomes clear what you're going to face. In this case, it was the whispering waters and the waterfall that you had to boat through without falling into the water or getting wet. And in that case, that was the risk. This is where things open up, and I'm going to end by talking about risk. And we like risk as a way of getting into another world. So you had to get on your boat, you had to boat through the waterfall, and you get to the piece on the other side. And then you get reward after risk. This is the idea. You get to meet these fellows, and you get a drink as well. Or all of those drinks, I think, has happened in this event. And finally, it's time to reflect, and you could do this in a social setting. It might be telling your friends when you next meet them what happened. Nowadays, it's probably more on social media. So that's how we like to design an immersive experience. And I always used to think that if we had the bread, we had the food, and we had the circus, we had the immersion, that was enough. That's all anyone would ever need. But I think in the discourse throughout today has been talking about really, entertainment is not enough, and we need to be more present and more aware of what we're doing. So, yes, entertains, but are you really there? Like, is it all too superficial and meaningless? See what you think about this video.
Welcome to Alcoholic Architecture, the world's first breathable cocktail bar. My name is Brother Rory. I'm going to be your host this evening.
Okay, so that was alcoholic architecture. That was the bar where you could get drunk by breathing in, going into a room where there's a cloud full of alcohol. And you can see for those video, were those people actually there? Was it just alcohol? Would they remember anything the next day? Was there any purpose at all? And were they paying attention to what's going on? So is entertainment and sensory immersion enough? So over the years, I've got thinking about this, over the years I've been involved in engineering a lot of boating lakes in funny places. This one was on the roof of Selfridges. This had an element of risk. You had to, again, it was a waterfall you had to go through. Here's another boating lake. This water already existed. People, note, are wearing life jackets in this one. Now, what happens when you do a boating lake indoors? This was a pirate-themed one for Captain Morgan rum, where you could boat around, you could collect ingredients to make a cocktail punch as you went from island to island. Seems fairly innocent and fun, but lots of people fell in the water. When the boating lake's outside, no one falls in. When it's inside, something happens. People are not paying attention. I don't know what they're doing when they're stepping into a boat and it's wobbly and it's a bit wet and they have an oar and paddling around. But they don't realize what they're doing. So people fall in and be surprised and shocked that they fell into the water. I thought people kind of knew what was going on, but clearly not. And so what I want to just finish by saying is how risk, I think, and as a studio we're starting to think, is a key to unlocking the next step of what we do with an immersive space. I think risk is a moment when the guest is required to give something of themselves up. Is this the moment when it becomes truly immersive and a participatory experience? So the people on the boats weren't aware that they were partaking in any risk. That was the first problem there. And that's when the guest goes from being passive to being active, and they're a participant in the experience. And currently we're working on the Museum of Shakespeare in Shoreditch in London, and this is on the site of the Curtain Playhouse, which is where Shakespeare once stood. It has the archaeological remains, and we're interested in how we create a large-scale immersive attraction that allows people to take risk and allows them to make their own journey through it. Here are some sort of indicative images of what some of those interiors might look like. So in this experience, we know so far they're going to be asked to be a player in Shakespeare's company. There's going to be many different routes through the experience. It's sort of half museum, half immersive experience. There are many routes through it, depending on your interest in Shakespeare, your knowledge and experience, and what sort of person you are. But ultimately, we're asking people to perform on stage where Shakespeare once stood, and effectively it's Shakespeare karaoke. But we want people to have a transformative moment and understand that Shakespeare was creative, and by some risk-taking, you can be creative too. And we'd like that to start at the museum. So risk is when an experience asks guests to play a part in how the experience is arranged or curated. So the Shakespeare Museum will do that. Every experience will be different. And with that comes missing out. So your experience definitely will not be the same as someone else's. It's provoking emotions as well. So we want people to reflect on their own emotional response to a place and things and information. And this can become a therapeutic process. And it's losing control. And through that, could it be ego death as well? So opening yourself up to possibilities. And ultimately, what really excites us in the studio at the moment is that this idea of risk-taking can become about creation. So by taking risk, it allows space for creativity. You do not know what the outcome will be. And that's the key thing with risk. You don't know what's going to happen. And that's what we're looking now for our experiences that we design to do, is to have this expansive opening so people can become part of that experience and it really resonates with them. So ultimately, risk being an instigator of creativity. So finally, I just wanted to tell you about something we're doing at the moment in the studio that's exciting us. We've been working on it for 4 years. And now is the time to unleash it to the wider world. We are launching a competition about fireworks, about the future of fireworks, what fireworks might look like. We're asking people to design new concepts of fireworks and spectacular sky-based entertainment. So if you're interested, please have a look on our website where you can enter the competition. But as part of this, we're also launching for the first time to the public, and I'm slightly terrified, an experience where you can go inside a box and have fireworks exploded around you. You can choose fireworks to explode and be one and with the fireworks. So I'm going to finish by showing a video of the second prototype. The first prototype is not for public consumption. It was terrifying. No health and safety was followed at all. But with this one, I feel, this is me, by the way, in the chamber, I feel we're finally getting somewhere. And what's exciting for the studio is going to be getting the public in to experience this. So if you're in London in June, come along, get the public in to experience it and get their feedback and really work with the participants to work out what we do with this next. Because at the moment, I'm not sure, but I know there's something there. So, thank you very much. I've avoided the balloon being popped by 2 minutes, went out with our own bang, so yes, thank you again.
So guys, this was the last act, and we are about to finish. Can I hear you? We're finished! And now, follow the band, where the party will start. And you can stand up, and you can follow the parade. So if everyone comes here to the front, and then we follow them.